you should be buying the rentals and holding the rentals, because that gives you the maximum for really being able to really decrease your liability.
And thank you, David, for being here. Welcome to the Lead Gen Underground. Give us a short intro about who you are for those that don't know you.
Sure. So I read Rich Dad Poor Dad in college and started investing in real estate. Did my first deal. It was a lease option, and the guy cashed me out 6 months later, and I was like, I got to keep doing this. So I hooked up with a real estate investing company, and we grew it from about 80 wholesale deals a year to like 300 deals a year, where we were doing turnkey, wholesaling, wholetailing, rentals, lease options. And I got to sit in every seat in that company. So that was really, really cool, really good experience. And one of those seats was the accounting seat. And I got to see how the numbers really affect you, and especially at that level. And so I actually left that company, worked with another investor, and we kind of transformed his books. And I'm like, okay, I really like doing this, and it really helped him a lot. So, and the other company I was with. So I want to start something that where I, as a real estate investor, actually helping people in the real estate world know their numbers. And then I read Profit First a while ago now, and that really resonated with me and with what I wanted to get out to the world. So that's another thing that we do too. So we help real estate investors make and keep more money and really have financial clarity and confidence through knowing your numbers and implementing Profit First inside of your real estate business.
Wow, isn't that amazing? So were you a real estate investor before are you a CPA?
I'm not a CPA or anything. No, we're just financial advisors, basically. Like, that's what we do. We always are making sure that we are working with people and help them know. We give them the information that every CPA and bookkeeper should give you. And like, as a real estate investor, and that's what we give you. That's like the actual results. So that's what we do. So no, I'm not a CPA or anything like that. We get the results that you want to see. So that's what we're doing right now.
That's wild, man. I love it because you hit me. You resonated with me for a few reasons. A, you're an investor fuel, and that's kind of how we connected, right? But two, just being perfectly transparent, the numbers have always been a weakness of mine. I'm a guy that's ready to get up and go and take action. And I'm like, I can figure out the rest later and I can make it work. Yeah. And I'll figure out the numbers later. And I used to keep numbers in such an embarrassing way. And I'm really embarrassed to tell you guys this, but I didn't even know if I made money on my first like 12 flips. I just assumed that I did. But because of how liquid events are sometimes, when you're finishing a deal and you got another one coming and it rolls into the next, right? We took big losses on a few properties, but we were too blind financially to even see it. Oh, and wow. I'm kind of embarrassed to tell you that. But the point is, I've gotten a lot better with it. Nowhere probably near where I need to be, but I've gotten a lot better with it. And so what you do really resonates with me. It really, I know that there's such a need for this out there. And I find it amazing that you're taking this niche and this is your message. And I think this is what you're giving to the world, right?
Yeah, I have definitely found my calling in this place where I just know, like you said, you're embarrassed, but honestly, it's like 95% of investors are that way. So it's like everyone's doing that. They don't know their numbers, or like if they do, it's like after doing deals like that and being like, I got to get serious about this. So it's like everyone's like that. And I just want to be like, you can know your numbers. It can be simple. And then like especially with Profit First too, just implementing that whole mindset, making sure that, you got into real estate not to live deal to deal, but actually like make money off your flips and make money off those deals. So yeah, I love it. And yeah, I definitely want to spread this message as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so give everyone a background on Profit First. I know the basics of it, but give everyone a background because not everyone here. I think on today's call, especially, we have a spread of experience and even exit strategies. But give everyone just a general overview of Profit First.
Sure. So Profit First is a book, and it was written by Mike Mikowicz, and it teaches you basically, if you've read like Rich Dad Poor Dad and these other books that tell you pay yourself first or like make sure you're profitable, none of those books really tell you how to do that, or like what's the system to actually keep the money. Like, oh, hire a good CPA, and yeah, that gets everyone in a really good spot, right? No. So what you need to do is you need a system for your finances, just like you have a system for your operations, your marketing, what you're spending on your dollars. You need to have that system around your finances too. So that's really what Profit First is about, putting that system in place to make sure you can pay yourself first, be a profitable company, and then make sure you're healthy too, because the whole foundation of Profit First too is setting up bank accounts, like one for your income, one which is like a holding account. Then you're setting up for where you're allocating from every sale, or like at a certain time, to make sure that the income that's coming in is allocated to those other accounts, like for your profit, your owner's pay, make sure you're paying yourself, taxes, like, so that way at the end of the year you're not like, I got to do several deals to pay my taxes, and then your operating expenses. So those are the foundational accounts from Profit First. And it's really, everyone in here probably looks at their bank statements more than their financial statements, or their bank accounts probably more than their financial accounts. So instead of saying like, okay, I need to learn the whole accounting world and I need to learn everything A to Z, it's more like, no, I can learn from just managing my bank accounts and managing the money that's going into those. And honestly, it's a huge red flag, like if you don't have enough in your operating expenses, because you're separating that out. You're separating it out to say, this is what I need to live off of in order to be a profitable company. So it really flips the accounting formula to like, your sales minus expenses equals your profit, like whatever's left over. It's really sales minus profit equal your expenses. So make sure you're taking a percentage as profit, and then what's left over you get to spend on growing your business, or like being in business, and like the actual operating expenses. So it's a different mindset, mentality. It's easier to track than always having to go to your financial statements. You should definitely be dangerous enough to know what's on your financial statements and ask questions, but like at the high level, you need to make sure that you're going to stay in business and be cash flowing. And that's really what that system does. It makes you really manage your finances from the bank level, which most of us do anyway. We have one bank account, and then like when there's a bunch of money in there, we're really happy. When there's not a lot of money in there, we're really scared, and we're going after either the lending or like making sure a deal is closed. So instead of like scrambling and doing like that, it's kind of evening out your money in the real estate world. So really helping you manage your cash flow from that high level that you're already managing your money from.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. So talk to me about, from a high level, what numbers should everyone be measuring on a weekly or monthly basis? You give me that time frame. What should everyone be looking at, just from someone who's starting out, right? Someone who's doing now regular deals and starting to work for themselves. What kind of numbers do they need to look at and keep their eye on?
The biggest number, especially when you're starting out, is getting your property profit. What did you make off of a deal? Because then you can work backwards from everything else. Now, if you can get the true property profit, you now know what is your cost per lead, what is your cost per acquisition, like what is your cost per, like all the different things that unlock it. So the first big number you need to know every single time a property closes is, what did you actually make? Not the cash that came into your account, not that. What did you actually make on the deal? Because that's what matters. A lot of people think, well, it's the cash that I got back. Well, no, not if you got extra funding. Then, then some of the money that's in your account is part of that profit. Or if you went over on the rehab, or like you had to use some of yours, you might have gotten some more back. And it's like, well, that's not all profit. Some of that was operating expenses that you got in. So the first big number is, what did I make on my property? The other numbers then are like, what am I spending that's not tied to marketing? Because like that unlocks the property profit, unlocks like your marketing, and like knowing you can work backwards then, like I was saying, the cost per deal and cost per acquisition. But then knowing what your operating expenses are, like what does it really take to run the business? Not the investments that I'm making, like marketing, but like what is the other things inside of my business that's really making it tick and making it and run. So that way, okay, right now I'm at 80% operating expenses. So I'm like way too high because of like versus what my property profit is, like for the last quarter. But that's why knowing your property profit is so important, because then you can take that and it unlocks all the other KPIs and all the other numbers that you need to get. But I'd say the big ones are your returns on your investment, like your marketing dollars, like what is your cost per lead, your cost per acquisition. And then I'd say even your exit strategies, if you have multiple exit strategies, like what are your different exit strategies producing for you? Because if you're like, this one's at 15 grand per deal, but this one's at 5 grand, is it really worth it? Are you doing the higher volume of the 5 or lesser volume? And is that taking too much time? So I would say property profit is the biggest one. Figure out how to figure out your property profit. Make sure you know the bottom line, because that unlocks all the other ones. Then you've got the higher level numbers, like, your operating expenses, knowing what the true percentage is there, and then knowing like all the marketing KPIs too.
Yeah, definitely. So when you say property profit, are you speaking net profit?
That's fun because like when you say net profit, is that like because on your profit and loss you have net income at the very bottom, and that's after everything is taken out as far as your operating expenses. What I like to call property profit is what most flippers is like your gross profit line. But your gross profit line could have like if you have commission people in it too. So what I like to do is in QuickBooks, we set up classes for every single property. So that way we can run a report by that specific property and see how much did this property make specifically by itself. So it's really my property profit is like the gross profit line, but gross profit, it's even dangerous to say that because other people could put stuff in cost of goods sold that's not related to selling a property. So it's really running it on the property level and just saying, okay, from this property, here's what I spent during the whole time, what I was into it at the time of sale, like including closing costs, the interest that I paid out, and then this is what I made after all of that. So that's what I'm talking about, property profit.
Okay, got it. That makes sense. So obviously, we're wholesaling a lot ourselves, mostly wholesale. Other
Awesome.
people in here are flippers, and obviously, there's a lot more involvement when you're flipping a property, a lot more
Yes.
line item expenses, right? So, is there much, in your opinion, is there much of a difference for what a wholesaler has to track versus what a flipper may have to track?
Yeah, I would say for sure because there's during that whole time as a fix and flipper, your expenses are not true expenses because they are sitting on that property until you sell it. You basically have a product, real estate, that is sitting there being improved until you sell that product. So like everything that goes on to that, you're building that asset. So like it actually sits on your balance sheet. And now I'm getting into the weeds really, but it's like it sits on that side of your books until you sell the property. So you have to keep track. But I love that too, because as you're actually fixing up the property, it shows you at any time where you're in that property. Like here's what I purchased it. Everything else is either holding costs or my material and labor on this project. So it sits there. So yes, there's a lot more to track on that side. If you're just straight up assigning, that's like almost providing a service, like that's really what you're doing. So it's like there's one line item for like your assignment fee. And as the top line income, that's your real revenue in the profit terms, in the profit first terminology. But like, so it's a lot easier on the wholesale side. If you're double closing, it can get a little bit fun too on the wholesale side, just knowing both sides of the transaction and where they sit. But honestly, yeah, fix and flips have a lot more to track. Then I'd say rentals is like next as, even more to track. And then you've got owner finance, which is like even deeper to track, which that can get really, really fun.
Yeah, definitely. Here's what I was going to ask you. Well, you recommend QuickBooks, right?
Yeah, that's what I recommend. QuickBooks Online.
Right, because then it can sync with your accountant or your CPA.
It can sync that, and there's like a whole bunch of other automation that you can run out of there. Like paying all your bills from that. It's like there's so many different things. Your payroll when you get a team, like payroll can be a few buttons, and then they send it to your like to the IRS and to your state automatically too, like the taxes that should be taken out. So it's like there's so many benefits to the online system to integrate with either other apps too, and like really run some pretty cool automation. And I'm all about streamlining.
That's awesome. Yeah, me too. So tell us about, I know you work with a lot of other investors. I think there's such power in tapping into someone who has knowledge from working with a wide variety of people. Talk to me about some of the things that your clients do who are, you would consider to be top performers versus the ones who are just getting started, or maybe some of those bottom dwellers who aren't doing the things that they need to be doing. What are the big differences you see in those top performers?
Taking action. I mean, come on. I mean, that goes across the board for anything, but especially in real estate, it's like they don't need a lot of time to go from decision to action. They do that almost immediately. Like, I've got some great stories. So there was a guy where we had cleaned up his books, and this is going to be in the book too that I write. But we had cleaned up his books. We showed him his numbers, and he was just livid. And he hung up the phone. Like he was mad. And so I got back on the phone with him a little while later, and it was like, "Hey man, what's going on?" He's like, it was tough facing those numbers, but we have to change. And he changed like literally the next month. Like it was like the end of the month. The next month we started like implementing everything, and he started like actually focusing on something that he like what he was good on. And like this year to date, he's done double the amount of deals as last year. His profit is like 4 times so far like this year as of last year. And the whole big thing was like he saw the problem and then he was like, immediately, I need to fix this. So I'd say that, but that's like with all the other top performers that we're working with too. It's like they know that it's not just like, oh, we're going to meet and then, then we got to, ho hum, go on our merry way. No, it's like the ones who are actually out there taking action.
Yeah, definitely. That's great news. Okay. From your perspective, for whether it be fix and flipper or someone, let's stick with a fix and flipper. What percentage profit should they be aiming for? So when we're underwriting a property or looking at a deal and working our numbers, in your opinion, what percentage profit should we be aiming for or aiming to get?
I'm going to tell you from like the profit first standpoint what my definition of profit is. So this is after you've paid yourself, saved for taxes, your operating expenses, your company, if you're healthy, is in between 10 and 15%. So like that's where your company as a whole, as a fix and flipping company, but you gotta remember what I just said. That's after paying yourself a decent salary. So it's not like, oh, I'm 30% profitable. Woo, that's great, or whatnot, or I'm 20% profitable, but you haven't paid yourself, that your taxes aren't saved out of that number or whatnot. So I'd say it's 10 to 15%, but after you've paid yourself and you're saving for taxes, you've paid all your operating expenses. That's really the sweet spot. If you want another great book besides Profit First to read, I would highly recommend Simple Numbers, Real Talk, Big Profits. That is a great book too. If you haven't read that book, that is another great book. It's almost complementary to Profit First. It's more on the mindset, and especially as you're getting bigger and hiring people and whatnot, tells like how to set up bonus structures too. It's a great one for real estate, even though it's not written for real estate specifically, but that's another one. But that's where, like 10 to 15%, I'd say you're a healthy company if you're in that range.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I actually picked up Simple Numbers because it was recommended in Scaling Up by Vern Harnish.
Yep.
It was recommended in there. So I was like, man, I really need to dive deep and learn a bit more. And so that was a really great book as well.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how much should we put aside for taxes? How should we prepare for taxes? That's something that I think a lot of people in our realm struggle with, because as entrepreneurs, as someone who's either paying quarterly or maybe at the end of the year and not taking out of every check, it becomes a little bit of a challenge. But what should we prepare for?
Right. So from every single sale, a certain percentage should go in. And if you're a fix and flipper, it's going to be much different than a landlord. Because if you've got rental properties, you probably don't have to save much at all in the way of taxes, which I've seen now, like in practicality and how cool that is, like with people. But as far as like a fix and flipper, Mike in the book recommends 15% across the board, like from every deal or whatnot, because you have to think, even though you're in a higher tax bracket, it's really your revenue or that property profit minus your operating expenses is really what you're taxed on. So it's like, it's not 30% of that top line or whatnot. It's like 15% of the top line, because out of that top line revenue or your property profit comes your operating expenses, and you get to write those things off, as the business owner or whatnot. So I've seen 15% be a good number, maybe 20% too, in between 15 and 20, but then you have to save it from every deal and start at the beginning of the year for the next year. So like if you're behind, you might need to catch that number up if you haven't started saving for that right now. So which we've done with some of the people that have started recently with Simple CFO. It's like, okay, you hadn't been saving taxes, so we're gonna bump that number, that percentage point up as much as we can on some of these deals, like as we can be comfortable with that, to like make it up. Because when it comes tax time, we don't want you sweating there saying, I don't have enough money to pay the taxes, just like you have every other year of being in business.
Yeah, absolutely. So while we're on taxes, how can we save some taxes? What are any tips that you may have?
I am not a tax advisor. Get this on the recording. So like, I'm not a CPA, so don't listen to anything I say after I say all of this. No,
for education only.
So, right. Buy rentals. Honestly, that's the biggest thing that you could do to save on your taxes. Like, is to hold rentals and to actually depreciate them and get that squeeze every, because like all the other stuff is like, oh, track your miles, blah, blah, blah. All that's great. And that's like really tedious. Go ahead, do all that. And but my biggest thing that I've seen is like, really, you should be buying the rentals and holding the rentals, because that gives you the maximum for really being able to really decrease your liability. I know some people that have businesses that aren't real estate, but they hold turnkeys inside of their business because it makes their business their taxes a lot less, just because they're holding like one or two turnkey rental properties inside of their entities that are like have nothing to do with real estate.
Just offsets that profit, I guess.
It really does. It really offsets that profit, and you're able to depreciate so much, and it's like it really helps. So I'd say the biggest thing you could do is buy rental properties.
Wow, isn't that wild? Okay. And so for someone who's either a wholesaler or fix and flipper or has a mixed model, what is kind of like the mix that you would recommend? So for us, let's just say for someone who's knocking down, just say $500,000 a year in gross profit with a smaller company, how many rentals should I try to hold, or how else would you measure that to determine?
First, even before having the tax thoughts and like that part, think of your team. Who's going to manage those? How are you going to put that in place? Are you going to have a property manager, and have you vetted them? So like that's the first questions I would be asking. Should we go down this path? Is it worth the tax savings to go down this path and just be like, just like I started the flipping business or whatnot? It's like just going into it blind. Think of some of those things and like, okay, who's really going to manage this? Who's going to manage that tenant? Who's going to manage all the different things going on? Oh, is it time? No. Okay. Just wanted to make sure it's not time, not baby time. Okay. So I would say you need to think of first as another business. As soon as you buy that first rental, it's another business. So be thinking of it like that right out of the gate. How am I going to manage the books of this rental? Am I going to set up a different LLC? Am I going to how am I going to actually prepare for this? And then I would go out and start buying one or two here or there, maybe like your first year, buying a couple just to see like, okay, can I manage this? And then from there, if your profit is growing, then it's like, okay, buy as many as you can feasibly buy and keep the management at that same level too, because it's like rentals are going to be your long-term play and your long-term wealth strategy, because those are hard assets that you're going to get to keep for however long that you want them, as long as they're producing for you. So it's like, I'd say start off slow, but then once you get the taste of it and you really see like, okay, this is how I'm going to manage it and scale it, start buying as many as you possibly can. Because like rentals are the long-term play. They really are. Because like fix and flipping is like a business that you have to always be in. It's like you always have to have that next property. Wholesale, and you always have to have the next property. But a rental is like a built-in subscription model. It's like a business within a business. So it's like you buy those rentals, you're buying a subscription.
Yeah, definitely. So. Dude, that's really solid advice right there. That's really good. I just had a question pop up from Ragu. He said, I use QuickBooks desktop. Is QuickBooks Online better than desktop? I understand the limitation to share with the CPA.
From my perspective, it is, but that's my opinion. I think it's way better because of the automation that you can build into it. My thing is I want to have a system that's going to scale with me and is going to allow me to spend as little time as possible on everything that I can do. And I feel like I have more capabilities to streamline through online than desktop.
Yeah, definitely. I can understand that. I actually didn't even know it was different products until we really started to dig into it. And the online version does make it a lot easier.
Yep.
All right, so let's back up from finances a little bit. You touched on it before, and this is actually one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, is because when I started to measure certain numbers within our marketing and then sales, it really unlocked the power of measuring to me, right?
Yeah.
I used to go in and be blind and just say, okay, we're going to send out 5,000 postcards and hope for the best. And then it would come back in, leads and then deals, and we'd cash out one for 10 grand or something like that. And then we'd repeat the process, just kind of like errors into the dark.
Yeah.
But then when I started to measure cost per lead, how many leads to deal, how many contracts until a closed deal, how much projected profit, how much closed profit, and I really started to track these numbers, guys, that's when it really turned on for me in terms of marketing and lead generation, because it becomes predictable. So talk about that a little bit, some of the most important numbers.
So before I say that, if you're not tracking your numbers, and I hope I piss you off if I say this, you don't have a business. I'm sorry, but it's not a business. It's a hobby to you right now. If you're not tracking your numbers, if you don't know your numbers, you don't have a business. And you could be like, well, I'm making so much money. My bank account says way different than what you're saying. But like, You don't have a business unless you know those numbers. That's just, especially if you want to scale. If you want to go anywhere in the business, you have to be tracking numbers. And like I was saying, first one, property profit, and then work backwards. Like, okay, then you say, how much did I spend on this mailing? How much did this property come from that mailing? So how much was my cost per lead from, like how many leads did I get and what was the cost breakdown for those leads? The acquisitions, how much did I actually acquire from this deal source? Because then you set that up for all of your different lead sources. And then you're like, okay, Facebook brought me this much, direct mail brought me this much, like I'm getting an 8 times return here and a 4 times return here, both real good. And this one I'm getting a 1.5. It's like, okay, should you shut that off now? Is it worth it? Some of the ones you have to go a little bit longer too, because I've seen people with texting, they do it for 6 months, don't get a deal, and then they get a deal in the 7th month, and it like is 6 times return. So it's like some of these things too, you have to let them run for a little bit of time too before you can actually have metrics in them. But I would say in your mind, you need to have cutoff dates of being like, okay, I can spend this much on texting before I pull it back or whatnot. I'm always thinking reverse engineering. How do I work backwards from this? How do I set that up? So it's like, what numbers do I need to know in order to run my business? And the biggest ones was what Josh was saying was know your cost per lead, your cost per acquisition. So you can know, am I wasting money on this marketing? I just like if like an employee, like you need to run these on your employees too. Like, what is my actual profitability per employee? Like, am I getting out everything that I possibly can? And am I actually getting a 6x return? So that's why you should look at your numbers too. I would say your payroll or like what you're paying other people, what percent of that is it of your business? Like, and are you getting a certain return? Because like if it's 30%, you're probably pretty healthy in the payroll department. It's like 30% or under there, you're probably okay. But like if it's much higher than that, if you're approaching 50, 60, 70% on payroll, which I've seen in companies, it's like, ooh, you got to get something out of there. So it's like knowing. That's why I keep beating into people's heads. Property profit is number one, because that gets you like where you are. And then as far as like profitability, then knowing out of that, for the last quarter, for the last month, what is my payroll or what is that operating expense percentage versus those numbers. So really knowing almost every line item. I mean, I know we're getting into the real weeds here, but like every line item and going against that gross profit number, that property profit number and saying, okay, where are the glaring red alarms here that I'm way off? So knowing your marketing, because obviously you want to have the most effective marketing and you don't want to just spray and pray, with your marketing, you want to be dialed in there. Those are the biggest ones. And then really really knowing your operating expenses and how they fit into the rest of your business.
Yeah, definitely. And guys, if this is like if making your eyes glaze over a little bit in terms of talking numbers, because you're like, well, I'm just starting out and I don't need to know it yet. And after I make more money, then I'll come and check in and I'll really check in with David and follow his advice then. Well, I'm telling you, if that's the case, then do an internal check really quick, because you probably have some sort of weakness there. And that's no offense, because I do as well, right? But it's a sign that you need to dive in there and know it a little bit better. And I'm telling you from firsthand experience that my business would have accelerated a lot quicker if I would have known just some basic numbers. You don't need to know every number, right? But on the lead gen side, here's some things that are super important in my business. With my guys in my huddles, we're talking prospects, leads, and opportunities from the day before every single day. On Mondays, we're talking that on a weekly basis. So here are the leads that came in, what channels, how many appointments did we set, and how many offers did we make? And then out of those offers, how many contracts did we get and the projected profit? And then on the backside, we're looking at how many B to C contracts did we sign that week? How many of our wholesale contracts did we sell? And then for what projected profit? And then settlements, like how much money did we actually make on how many contracts? So we're looking at these high level numbers. And I just started measuring those in the past 8 months. And I'm telling you that with embarrassment, because if I'd have measured them quicker in my career, business would have taken off a lot quicker. It's no coincidence that you start to measure something and then it gets managed, right?
Yep, totally.
No coincidence. All right, guys, we're wrapping up here at the very, very end. Give everyone one piece of advice, just a general piece of advice that you think is needed, something that a lot of people ask or something that you tell a lot of people.
Read profit first and implement it is probably the biggest one, and that I'm giving people right now. And then really really take pride in your business and say, I'm going to know my numbers, because that's how you're going to grow.
That's great. Simple, but really great. David, thank you so much. Give us a plug. Tell us a little bit about what you do and then how everyone can follow you, get in touch with you.
Sure. SimpleCFOsolutions.com is where you can, if you're interested in the services for Simple CFO. But then as far as the actual, like what we're doing, we're actually writing Profit First for real estate investors. That our team is with Mike McCowitz, who wrote Profit First. So we've created ProfitFirstREI.net too. So we've got a podcast for Profit First for real estate investors that you can find there. We have a Facebook group, a private Facebook group that you can search to, Profit First for real estate investors. So if you're on this call, you can look that up. We'll accept you as long as you say you're, like from the Lead Gen Underground. So that's a couple things that you can get involved where we have some free information. Then if you're interested in Simple CFO, go to SimpleCFOsolutions.com.
Dude, I love it. That's
Awesome.
it's a needed service. I am definitely going to link up with you on that as well, because I think I can strengthen my own business with it.
Awesome. Yep.
David, thank you so much for your time today. I hope you guys got a lot of value out of that. I know I certainly did. Go out and measure your numbers and start to kill it.
Awesome.
David,
Thanks,
take
Josh.
care, buddy. Thanks so much. Talk to you guys soon.
You.
See you next week, guys. Bye-bye.